How can we make sense of the future of work? I mean, according to McKinsey Consulting, 20 to 25% of the workforce could work from home 3 to 5 days per week, and that should be okay. That's why I have my guest this week, Jess Podgajny. She's the founder of Lluna, the team operating system for modern employers. It combines personal operating profiles and smart dashboards to increase team connection and productivity. Jess is also the host of Fresh Takes on the Future of Work podcast. I am so excited to have her. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. So whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I'm here with my guests to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself into the future. My name is Lindsay. I'm a product market fit strategist and innovation advisor. I've always been obsessed with designing technology for people. So let's get started. Jess, how are you?
Oh my goodness, Lindsay, I am so excited to be here today with you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I put your name down almost right away when I put down all the 2023 trends and predictions, and so many fell into future of work, and you were top of my list to talk about it.
Oh, well,
So
I'm incredibly flattered. So thank you very much. I'm really excited for this conversation.
all right. So it's starting to become the kickoff segment of almost every episode. We start with crystal ball. What does the future hold? So I call out interesting predictions for this year, and the experts, my guests, they tell us their hot take. So I do them pretty quickly. Jess, I kind of want you to, I want that to happen, or that's definitely happening, or no, not this year, not anytime soon. And we can always deep dive into something later in a following segment. So, first one, to address kind of the beginning of this podcast, hybrid work is here to stay. Companies will focus on when just as much as where we work.
That is true. Thumbs up on that one. Hybrid work is here to stay.
Awesome. I think that should make a lot of people feel really great. How about this one? I thought this was interesting. Downturn or no, companies will hold on to workers. It's called labor hoarding or talent warehousing. Are we seeing that happen right now?
Ooh, I'm not sure that this is really happening right now. I think that retention is always an opportunity for employers. How are we retaining talent? But I'm not seeing a lot of hoarding at the moment, especially in the context of the perceived downturn.
Got it. Yeah. So wishful thinking, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, this one, I know you and I have had conversations about this, particularly conversations happened a lot during the Techstars program. We both were in last fall. Hang out at work without the office. Companies are trying to figure out how to increase informal conversations for learning and development, maybe creating virtual team rooms in the metaverse. What do you see happening? What's going on?
Ooh, this one is an interesting one to tease apart. So I do think we are trending towards how do we use the office in a different way as a way to create those spontaneous interactions. Our data within Luna's technology tells us people like to come to the office for those more spontaneous, organic interactions that can happen. So I think we will see more and more of that. I don't know about the metaverse's role in it
Mm.
because what I believe people are craving is actually human connection. They're like, I don't want to go to the office every day, but when I do go, I want to be able to spend some time intentionally, spontaneously hanging out. So,
Right.
I think we'll see more of the like, what does face to face in the office actually look like? And maybe we're not going for meetings as much as we are for that building those connections in a more organic way. Metaverse, I'm sort of lukewarm on it. I think it will be something somewhere, but I don't know how much of an appetite people really have for like kind of walking around as an avatar inside a virtual room on a computer screen where we spend so much time already.
Right, right. And so in the learning and development and trying to find these spontaneous moments, it's particularly important. Well, one for culture and connection, which we will continue to talk about, but also for younger employees because they're kind of missing out on the all the things about the job and the company that are not in the training, right?
Yep.
And those things get picked up when you're going for a cup of coffee in the break room, things like that. And so I do remember when I was scouting for the Techstars program and looking at different startups, there were some that were trying to create that serendipity through the chat tools that we have. But I agree with you. I think people like the serendipity and in person kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we recommend often to our clients and what we are seeing more and more of is creating intentional forums for that spontaneity. And by that what I mean is maybe you have a senior leader who's like, "Hey, I'm going to have lunch in the cafe. We're going to cater it. And I'm going to talk about these three topics that are important to our business, but might just be interesting. And then we'll see where it goes." Or maybe you have a few newer people to an organization coming to share their experience in joining the company. And again, you're creating these like forums to have more dialogue and conversation, but you're sort of setting them up. So you're setting the
Mhm.
stage and creating the space for it. And then it turns into, oh my goodness, like I didn't know you had that early career experience. I would love to have a follow-up coffee and learn more about that. Or I didn't
Exactly.
realize you have this skill, etc. So there's lots of ways that are relatively simple and really cost effective that we can be setting up this spontaneity in the physical world,
Yeah. And
that I
I
think will take off.
and I like those solutions because just so often the collective we often go to technology as like the solution to all our problems and ignore the people part. And you just offered a really nice kind of people only solution that doesn't cost a lot of money to carry out, right? We don't need a whole technology solution. We just series of events like this that are encouraging more casual dialogue. I think that's great.
Absolutely.
All right, we have a few more headlines. Next, labor movement will surge, but employers will fight back. So, this is all about nationwide organizing campaigns and unionization.
I don't know. I'm really torn on this. I think that there is absolutely a place for a union.
Mhm,
It is a powerful, powerful opportunity for people to organize.
mhm,
I think it is a possibility. I don't know how much is going to happen this year,
mm. Are
but
we preoccupied with other things?
I think we are. I think, the layoffs in tech will result in some really interesting things that happen. We're
Mhm,
already seeing a shift in people moving to more gig work, more of those freelancer 1099 type models. But we could see that come back around in the form of a union,
yeah,
organizing like software engineers to protect their rights for volatile employment,
yeah,
basically kind of fast hiring, high growth organizations, and then really short term thinking around, we've got to meet our numbers for the next quarter or the
right.
earnings call or whatever the scenario. So we've got to cut a lot of expense. And where does that come from? So I could see some interesting things emerging there. But I don't think it's going to come around this year.
Yeah. No. We'll probably continue to see it in for instance, Amazon delivery drivers just unionized with the Teamsters. We'll see it continue to see it in a lot of hourly jobs, but the kind of white collar salary jobs, I think we're not going to see it just yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting if it does emerge there for sure, but I'm with you. And then on the hourly side, I do think like the like living wage conversation continues to be a topic, and that's why it is important for the
Yeah.
unionization, because like inflation being what it is, your white collar workers today are feeling the pinch. So
Yeah.
imagine your hourly workers who are
Right.
really feeling crunched, can't make ends meet, and that's not a place any of us want to live. So we've got
No.
to figure out how we can kind of raise the floor, so to speak, and unions will help us drive that.
Yeah. All right. Squeezed by competing leader and employee expectations, managers need the most support.
This is it. Like, how many hands can I
All of the
throw in the air? I've got, if I had
huge
8
problem.
arms, I would put them all up. Managers are the ones right now that are feeling the biggest stress because they've
Hmm.
got to meet the objectives of the organization. They've got to make it work with whatever talent is on their team, especially in bringing up layoffs again. Maybe you're doing more with less. That's kind of a big topic of conversation. How are we going to do more with less? Managers are bearing that burden. And then, like, let us not forget the fact that a few years ago, we were not working in hybrid and remote environments. It was sort of the atypical model. And now it's pretty much the typical model for your knowledge workers. Managers need to figure out how to lead in these environments. How do you lead people that you can't physically interact with day to day, that you're only experiencing or maybe only ever meeting in a 2D environment?
Yeah.
So managers they need the most support. They need training, they need tools. Plug for Lluna here. Lluna is a great tool for managers. And they need added support from their employer, and frankly they probably need higher compensation because in many ways they didn't sign up for this.
Right, right, sure. Also, when they were coming up in the company and in their career, whomever was modeling to them management behavior and best practices, was in an environment that was mostly in person. So
Yep.
imagine, going up the ladder, getting a job as a manager right at the beginning pandemic.
Oh yeah.
You have your whole playbook from the previous years
Fun.
is feels like it's thrown out the door to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll just add there, in some ways, our Gen Zs and young millennials are the digital natives of the world, are sort of seamlessly adapting in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. Certainly, there are things we can talk about that maybe they're missing, not being in person, but they've adapted to using tech and using tools. But some of the people that you're talking about that aren't necessarily digital natives are like, I need to know what's available and how to use it and what the best practices are. And so there's just more of this, like it isn't instinct where it might be with some of our early career
Right.
employees right now.
Exactly. Okay, last one. Shorter work weeks will become more prevalent.
So this is a big thumbs up for me. It is going to happen. It is not going to all transform this year, but we are going to see more and more organizations moving to this model. There are a couple of ways that this model is showing up. One is in a compressed work week, so still sticking to that sort of hours mindset of 40 hours per week, but in 4 days instead of 5.
Hmm.
There is the true 4-day work week uh, mission. There's an organization, I think it's 4dayworkweek.org, that's really pioneering a 32-hour work week and has been able to demonstrate that there's not really a dip in productivity. People are just more efficient with their time in those 4 8-hour days. And then I am a big advocate and believer in focusing on outcomes and not hours. So
Mm.
your work week should be whatever you want your work week to be, based on the work that you need to get done.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in one really maybe extreme example, what if we had a set of outcomes for a calendar year that we were supposed to accomplish?
Right.
And I get them done in October. Maybe I didn't take off a lot of time. Maybe I worked 5 or 6 days a week, but
Right.
I finished my outcomes by October. I take the rest of the year off, or I
That would be
start prepping for
amazing.
next year. So, I think we really need to start shifting our mindset. Hours have never been the perfect answer, because what you can do in an hour, Lindsay, might be different than what I can do in an hour, especially based on what the topical area is.
Yeah.
And we really need to focus on outcomes.
I will tell you, one of the biggest eye openers for me when I started as an independent contractor and consultant 10 years ago was that actually logging 40 hours between Monday and Friday, uh, turning off my timer if I got distracted by Facebook, turning off my timer when I go to the bathroom or the kitchen or have lunch. 40 hours is actually a very hard number to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you're working just as an independent contractor and you're allowed to bill up to 40 hours a week, it is
Yeah.
actually quite hard to reach that number. And I would be really interested or just wondering, if you take a generic team at a generic company, a cross section, like those people probably are not working, actually doing work for 40 hours a week, right? There might be on site for 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
right? And so if that's why I think outcomes is best, but I also think that we as humans have a lot of different motivations, and some people are just more extrinsically motivated and need kind of and have the kind of sense of butts in chairs, right? Kind of they need that to get their work done versus
Yeah.
others that are very so self-motivated.
Yeah. I mean, one headline we haven't talked about, but I'll bring up is co-working.
Right.
I think we are going to move to a hyper local co-working model
Mm,
where people don't want to sit in their homes all the time. They
right.
don't necessarily want to always work from their house, but they also don't necessarily want to commute an hour to the city or whatever urban area their office is headquartered, but they probably would benefit from driving a mile or two from their house and operating in an office environment with other
Hmm.
professionals,
Right.
not always from their company, but potentially. And so I think we're going to see a lot of satellites popping up for big corporations, like offering satellite working spaces inside co-working environments. I think people are going to start demanding that as a benefit of employment. Um, and I think that will help with what you're saying, that some people need that environment or crave that environment. Some people don't want it all the time, but want the option to
Right.
have that. And the other thing I'll call out is, if you think about the arc of a week or a month, you probably have, to your point, like every like 40 hours in every week is not like highly productive. You need sort of recovery time, you need thinking time, you need admin time. There's a whole lot of things baked in there. But if you figure out what works well for you, maybe it's that office setting, maybe it's that home office there, and we're starting to see some really good research around this, that if you need collaboration and you need a team to align and make decisions, being co-located and like
Hmm.
sitting with cross-functional groups in the same space is really beneficial.
Right.
um, if you need to get in the flow and have that heads down thinking time, then working in an environment where you can, whether it's home or a co-working environment or a coffee shop, where you can just like sit down and go,
Right.
that is going to be the most beneficial thing. So we have like spurts of highly productive hours. You might have one day where you pick up your head and it's dark outside and you're like, holy mackerel, I just worked for 12 hours straight and it feels like it was two. That is the
Mhm.
flow state that everybody like loves and craves.
Right.
The next day, you might be so exhausted from all that mental thinking that you have like
Exactly.
2 productive hours.
Right.
And that's okay. That's actually recovery that will benefit you again later when you get another big spurt.
And that's why we are pro measuring outcomes versus hours.
100%.
100%. All right. So, in our second segment, deep dive, I want to talk more about culture and how a company's culture can be a business driver. So, when I was looking up some of these headlines and trends to throw out to you for the previous segment, I noticed that most listicles and predictions didn't really include trends around the company's culture.
Yeah.
The only trend I saw on one listicle was creating a culture of security, so information security, which
Interesting.
which is just, getting your organization to take it more seriously,
Yep.
which if you can't tell I don't consider to actually be a trend around company culture. So why do you think it is that just company culture seems to have been left off the lists of predictions?
Yeah, I think that it is sort of like there was a time in the, let's say 2010 to 2016 or so, where like culture, it was like, what is culture? Is it soft? Like we started to see the emergence of the foosball tables and the happy hours and the that like culture was these were these like things.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it was highly like buzzy back then. I
Hmm.
think now there is general consensus that a strong culture for an organization delivers ROI.
Right.
And so I think what people are talking about, and what I'm seeing come up more and more is less of a like we have to like build a culture. It's more about how do we transform our culture from what it was in person in real life, like 40 hours a week model, to a more virtual digitized model that still delivers on the connection between the people in the organization. How do
Hmm.
I get people feeling connected, feeling like they trust one another, they know one another, they can find a best friend at work, they understand the values of the organization and how they need to show up as a result of those values. They get the core purpose and connect to it. It gives them meaning at work.
Right.
These are all the things, they're all the questions that are getting asked and answered in some ways. um, and it's not necessarily being called culture, but it is
Right.
culture.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. In my world as an experienced designer, service designer, I've worked on some very large projects with companies in, the Fortune 50, Fortune 100 range. And since I'm analyzing internal processes and kind of the external delivery of customer experience, I've always glommed on to the statement that whatever experience you want your employees to offer your customers, you have to offer them,
Yep.
right? So if Apple stores provide this glossy, seamless kind of experience for customers walking in the door, then what those frontline workers experience, the company needs to treat them like that. So if their
Yeah.
HR systems are freaking terrible to use, and every kind of internal software system is awful, right? And computers are old, then those Apple employees aren't going to walk out on the retail floor and be like, this is, the best thing since sliced bread. They're not going to be able to
Yep.
offer that experience.
Yeah.
Have you thought about it in that way too? I know that with Lluna, there is some buildup around shared values. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think what you're talking about now is often referred to as a people first culture. And the meaning of that is that we put our people first so that our customers are benefiting from happy employees
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So 100% people first culture. I am an advocate, a believer, and a builder of those cultures. Like that is,
Hmm.
um, I've seen it work in many organizations, and I've seen a lot of organizations that have failed or have been unable to retain their best top talent as a result of not creating that people first culture.
Right.
We're human at the end of the day, and we're not stupid. So companies that approach it of like, oh, like we're just, you got to do all these things for the our customers, and then I'm gonna treat you negatively. It can only last so long.
Right. Because people over all things, like they want that meaningful work, they want the opportunity to grow and learn. And if we're just treating it, if companies are just treating the employer employee as like a transaction,
Yep.
oh, they'll do this thing because it's their job to do this thing,
Yep.
which I wrote about in my newsletter yesterday, actually. So it's not going to work, right? It's not the right strategy.
It's a really industrialized mindset. That is that we were widgets before. We were like, we showed up and we did the thing on the conveyor belt and we went home.
Hmm.
And that isn't the way most people are working now.
Hmm.
And therefore we need to change the mindset of it. And so employers, I do believe, are shifting in that direction. We have a lot of great examples of those people first organizations who have been highly successful. So they're proving out the model. But at the end of the day, to me, the way that I would define culture is that, if it's an equation, culture equals purpose plus values.
Okay.
Okay, so culture equals purpose plus values. So the purpose of that organization has to speak to the people that work there. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's it for? At the end of the day, is this a noble mission that I want to get behind? Is this something
Hmm.
that like I'm really passionate about? And then the values of the organization are the how. How do we show up? And supporting those values are typically some pretty explicit behaviors that are expected. Now, whether you know what those behaviors are in a what I would call a culture framework, and they're very clearly stated and shared, or if they show up in performance reviews or in just conversationally within the teams that you're working on, there are behaviors that are expected in support of values. So if you have a value as an organization, and one of the companies I worked with to create their culture framework, one of their values was urgency. So the
Hmm.
behaviors around that are, how do we move with speed? How do we move with speed to in pursuit of, it was a life sciences organization, in pursuit of getting like pharmaceuticals to market faster for the patients that need them.
Yeah.
So how do we move expediently? And some of the behaviors around that were, how are we making decisions? Are we collecting the right information? Are we getting the right people in the room the first time?
Right.
And so when you kind of string all of that together, you can think about how do I want to show up in this model, in this organization, and does it align with my own personal values? Your personal values don't have to match exactly the company's values, but they should be complementary.
Right. And you should find meaning in what the company means. And I
Yeah.
like how you spelled out specific examples, like urgency means this to us,
Yeah.
because I think I kind of made a face when you first said urgency, because no one wants to work in an office where you're fighting fires all the time, right?
No, no.
Right.
But if you can kind of move a product, like a drug, through a process as efficiently as possible, that can help you with that urgent type mindset. Like we've got to save people's lives here. So how do we do the work right the first time? How do
Hmm.
we align as a team really effectively, so we know who's doing what and we understand, we have clarity as we move forward, all in support of that.
Now, like, so we're talking about culture as a business driver. Does Luna help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So There's a few ways Lluna helps with that. The Lluna tech at its like fundamentally, you called it out at the beginning. It's these personal user manuals. We call them POPs. So personal operating profile, and these smart dashboards. The dashboards are helping teams to really visualize and quantify how they can work best together.
Mm,
And I don't know about you, but I have been a part of a lot of teams in my 2-decade career, and I have loved many of them, and I have hated many of them.
right.
And the teams that I have hated were not aligned, had a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding.
Right.
People were making assumptions about other people that were inaccurate, oftentimes. No one was assuming good intentions, and it made work suck.
Right.
And I love work. Like I love it. But in those on those teams, it sucked. Like I was like, I can't believe I'm so annoyed that I have to work with this team. But
Right.
then flip that. If you're working with a team who you understand, you feel like you have some connection to, you know them enough. You could like sit down and, have a cup of coffee or grab a beer with them.
Sure thing.
You know that like in stressful moments when those come up, because they always come up, you know
Hmm.
how to best connect and align with those people. And the challenge is that in remote and hybrid environments, it got harder.
Yeah.
We weren't like sitting next to each other and learning our ticks all the time. Like it's different now. And so our technology, the smart dashboards you mentioned, help teams to see how we're similar, how we're different, and provide back insights about how you can work most effectively. And then your pop is like a way to showcase who you are. It's kind of this
Right.
cool trophy that you get to share with other people. It lives on a URL. It's like a LinkedIn profile on steroids, if you want to think about it that way. Um, and it just creates this way for people to engage with you as a human being that's
Right.
also going to deliver some awesome outcomes at work.
Yeah. Well, everyone should have a pop, and I have a pop, so.
You do have a pop. Yes. I agree with you. Everyone should have a pop. So make sure they're free to make. So make sure you make one.
In the 4 to 6 months since we were working together in the Techstars program, I have definitely brought up Lluna so many times because people have these problems working remotely. So that brings us to the next segment, and it's probably our last one, from disruptive to disastrous. So in this segment, my guest and I talk about when technology backfires.
Yeah.
So today, the role of instant messaging and chat services like Slack and Microsoft Teams, they've grown significantly over the past decade, but specifically over the past 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic. And Jess, you had just said, remote collaboration got harder. And one of those things that I can tell you from a more academic perspective is that we're using so many computer mediated communication tools. So even when it's video, to chat or text message, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, whenever there's any technology in between, it's computer mediated and
Yeah.
you're losing some sense of meaning that you would have if you were in person,
Yeah.
right? So we know in for those of us that have worked on our communication styles, for instance, over email, one of the best practices is to mirror someone else's language and writing style, because that's what is their kind of benchmark and framework for judging you as a person and judging your intent, right?
Yeah.
So if someone writes short sentences and you keep replying with a formal email with very long sentences, they're probably going to start thinking you're onerous, right? You're inefficient, you're slowing them down, right? But if you receive a very nicely formed letter with a hello, Lindsay, and a best and sign off, whatever, very, very professional in that way. Um, a person that responds with just two sentences without that formality is going to be perceived as rude, right? And that paradigm translates to instant message, to text messages, to Slack channels and chat rooms, right?
Yeah.
And when you're losing those extra dimensions of intent and meaning, a lot of us tend to fill in the blanks with negativity.
Definitely. Yeah, it's so complicated when you take a step back from it because we have the benefit of all of these incredible tools and technology channels um, today. Like, so we've got lots of choice. Um, in in my research and in the way that this has shown up in Luna's technology, it's about understanding people's preferences, trying to align on a preference for a team to
Mm-hmm.
establish a norm. So, my team, for example, the majority preference for um, like day-to-day communications is chat. So we channel everything through Slack specifically.
Right.
If I get an email from someone on my team, like I feel like I'm I'm like, what are my eyes deceiving me? Like, what has happened? Why am I getting an email from this person? Because it's not a norm, and like I don't need another email, and
Yeah.
we normally communicate via Slack. So I think that there's this sort of fundamental piece that's missing. Like when in the absence of alignment, we just use whatever we personally prefer, or we try a little bit of everything. And then there's nothing more frustrating than being like, where was that message that someone sent me? I need to go back and reference it. I
Mhm.
now have no idea which channel. Was it in text? Was it in email? Was it in
It
Slack chat, a
causes so much
Teams chat?
disorganization. So
Where
much.
the hell
Yeah.
is it? Yes. So I think we need to sort of just like go back to basics a bit and say, how are we going to do this as a team? How do I prefer it as an individual? How can I communicate that? Even just like in terms of channel first. And I also want to say, I think because of the dawn of chatting, text, and any of the chat tools that we have, we've significantly diminished our interest in a good old fashioned phone conversation.
Right.
And I see, especially, I'll say maybe earlier career
Yeah.
employees going back and forth on a chat for days about the same topic, and there's swirl. It's like you're sort of just missing each other in terms of point or intent
Yeah.
or getting to the core of the problem. And how much more impactful would it be if one person just said, let's jump on a Zoom or a Teams or get on the phone.
Someone has to call it.
You have to call it. And some of the norms we've helped put in place with our customers, our Lluna customers, are things like, if an email goes back, if it's like ping pong ping, it's a third email and you still don't have resolution on the thing, it needs to be either a quick phone conversation or a meeting if it's something that's going to take longer.
Yeah.
Don't let it keep going back so you have threads of emails, 4,000 like emails long. It's just a waste of time.
It is.
And
It's
so I
total waste of
think we
time.
we lean on chat because it feels easy, it's on our own terms,
It's
and
instant.
it's instant. Yes. And I think sometimes we need to just be like, you know what, let's put a pin in this and let's actually get to the core of the challenge. And where it really falls down is when two people are at odds. When
Hmm.
they don't get along, they don't like each other, they don't understand each other,
Right.
and then they don't want to get on the phone or video with the other person because they're like, I don't want to look at your face, you don't want
Right.
to look at my face, so we'll just go back and forth in chat and I'll just complain about you to whoever else will listen. And it's just
I don't
perpetuating a
miss
really
that.
horrible problem. So we all need to be a little more brave and be like, I don't actually want to engage with this person any longer. Maybe there is someone you don't want to work with, and say, hey, let's just like nip this in the bud. Let's get on a call. Let's have a conversation. Let's make sure we can move it forward. And then we don't have to talk to each other. This is
Right.
painful going back and forth. So
If only we could all just talk straight to each other
I know,
like
I
that,
know.
right?
I mean, instant message is it's great in some ways and for very certain and specific use cases, and I think in other ways it can be detrimental to the way that we're working together.
Mm, mm. You're absolutely correct. Well, we are wrapping up, Jess. How can we make sense of the future of work? If I could recap, there's a few things here. Hybrid work is here to stay. We will continue to talk about shortening the week, whether it's hours, days, that type of flexibility. Um, what else do we think we need to understand? I think what it is at the end of the day is having a people first strategy, thinking
Yeah.
about how your people connect with each other and not just literally over chat versus phone, but also over culture and values. And that's what's going to create kind of the winning formula. And what was the formula you said for culture?
Yeah, so culture equals your purpose plus your values.
All right. Well, that is simple enough and totally makes sense. So, thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tabus, and guest, Jess Podgajny, founder and CEO of Lluna. It drives data driven belonging. I messed it up. How do you use that?
We're all about data driven belonging, using people's preferences, styles, and information about themselves to drive belonging within organizations to unlock really great results for companies.
Awesome. Jess, where can people find you online?
Yes, please link in with me. I love connecting with new people on LinkedIn all the time. So definitely find me there. Our website for Lluna is helloluna.com. So double L. And absolutely check us out there. And please create a POP, a personal operating profile. They're free to make, takes anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes to complete one. And I'd love to hear about your experience doing so and how you intend to use it.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're on YouTube, share your pop in the comments. We'd love to see it. So, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, hit that subscribe for next week's episode. I'm in the early days with this, and every subscriber on these platforms, specifically right now, YouTube, although an audio stream will come eventually, it makes a huge difference if you hit subscribe. You can check out all the links and resources in the show notes. That is all for this episode, and catch up with you next time. Thank you, Jess, for joining me.
Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. This was great.